The emergency room was chaos. Her face was a ruin of blood and bruises, and I felt nothing. A doctor handed me a clipboard. "You need to sign the consent forms," he said. "She's listed as your wife." I looked down at the woman on the gurney, her face swollen and discolored from the fists of her lover's wife. She moaned, a pathetic sound, her eyes searching mine for a flicker of pity. I pointed a steady finger at her and asked the doctor in a perfectly level voice, "I'm sorry. Is this woman?" It was late, and the vibration of my phone on the nightstand was a relentless drill boring into the pillow, boring into my skull. I opened my eyes. In the darkness, the words City General Hospital glowed with an ominous white light. A whisper of premonition ghosted through me, but failed to cause a ripple. All I felt was a familiar, crushing numbness. I answered the call. "Is this Mr. Ethan Hayes?" A young man's voice, tight with anxiety. "Your wife, Chloe Reed, was brought into our ER. She's in critical condition. We need you to come down here immediately." Wife. Critical condition. The two phrases together should have made my heart stop. Instead, I just listened, a strange, almost cruel sense of relief washing over me. "I'm on my way," I said, and hung up. I got dressed without a moment's hesitation. On the drive to the hospital, the city's neon lights blurred into streaks, a surreal dream that had nothing to do with me. My mind was a blank slate, no worry, no anger, just the dead calm before a hurricane. The unique hospital smell, a sterile cocktail of antiseptic and blood, finally pulled me back to reality. The hum of voices, the squeak of a nurse's shoes, the low groan of a patient in pain. It all felt like it was in slow motion, every detail hyper-focused and terribly clear. A young doctor saw me and hurried over, his face etched with urgency. "Mr. Hayes? Thank God you're here. The patient's injuries are severe. She needs surgery right away. Can you sign these consent forms for us?" He led me to a gurney. The woman on it, if you could still call her that, looked like a broken doll that had been carelessly glued back together. Her hair was matted with sweat and dry blood. Her once beautiful face was a swollen, misshapen mess of purple and blue, with crusted blood at the corners of her mouth and nostrils. But I knew that face, knew its every line and curve. She was once my entire world, the treasure I would have done anything to protect. "My wife, Chloe." The doctor pressed a pen and a clipboard into my hand. "Hurry, Mr. Hayes. We don't have time to waste. Any delay could be dangerous." My hand hovered over the paper, the cheap plastic of the pen feeling cold and sharp against my skin. On the gurney, Chloe seemed to hear us. A broken whimper escaped her throat. She struggled to open her eyes, swollen to mere slits. Her gaze swam in and out of focus before finally landing on my face. In that instant, I saw it all. First, the panic. Then, a wave of familiar, theatrical self-pity. And finally, her signature move, the look of a wounded animal begging for rescue. Her lips moved, forming my name over and over, silently. "Ethan, Ethan." She thought it would work. That one look, and like all the times before, I would soften, give in, and clean up her mess. A bitter wave of nausea washed over me. The sweet memories, the sacrifices I'd made for her, crashed against the image of her face, cold and contemptuous. The day I discovered her betrayal. The collision left behind nothing but a frozen wasteland inside me. I took a deep breath, the coppery scent of blood making my stomach turn. I didn't look at her. I fixed my gaze on the doctor's anxious face. My voice was flat, devoid of any emotion, tinged only with a hint of genuine confusion. "Doctor," I said, "I'm sorry. Who is this woman?" For a second, the clamor of the ER around us seemed to fall silent. The doctor's hand, holding a medical chart, froze in midair. He stared at me in disbelief. And on the gurney, Chloe's swollen eyes shot wide open. The pleading, the self-pity, the carefully constructed vulnerability, it all evaporated, leaving behind only the raw, naked terror of a person struck by lightning. Her lips began to tremble violently. She tried to speak, but no sound came out. The ice in my eyes was a wall between us, absolute and unbreakable. The doctor, stunned by my bizarrely calm demeanor, glanced from me to the desperate woman on the gurney, utterly baffled. My question wasn't a question. It was a verdict. It had just slammed shut her last escape route and officially raised the curtain on my meticulously planned revenge. Mr. Hayes, what kind of joke is this? The doctor finally stammered. He pointed a shaking finger at Chloe, then at his chart. You don't know her? Her emergency contact is listed as Ethan Hayes, her husband. His voice dripped with the accusation and contempt one reserves for a heartless spouse. A few passing nurses and family members shot me curious, disdainful looks. I could feel their judgment like tiny needles, but my expression didn't waver. My gaze was steady as I met the doctor's. Doctor, there must be some mistake, I explained, my voice deliberate. My wife, Mrs. Hayes, is in perfect health and should be at home right now. I paused, letting my eyes drift over to Chloe, who was now trembling uncontrollably at my words. As for this woman, I said, I truly have no idea who she is. Or perhaps it's more accurate to say that from this moment on, I no longer wish to know. The words landed like a sledgehammer. Chloe's composure shattered. A hoarse, strangled cry, like that of a cornered animal, tore from her throat. She thrashed, reaching out to grab my sleeve. Her go-to move, the one meant to trigger my last ounce of pity. But this time, I simply took half a step back, neatly evading her blood and tear-stained hand. My face remained a mask of indifference, as if her agonized cries were just another part of the ER's chaotic soundtrack. A nurse rushed over to help the doctor restrain her. Ma'am, please, you need to calm down. You have multiple contusions and soft tissue injuries. You're only making it worse. The doctor's patience had clearly run out. He turned to Chloe, his tone becoming cold and clinical as he looked at her pain-twisted face. Ms. Reed, this gentleman insists he doesn't know you. We need a family member to sign for the surgery. Is there anyone else we can call? Chloe shook her head wildly, tears carving clean paths through the grime and blood on her swollen cheeks. She knew, besides me, no one else would come. Or rather, no one else would dare to come. After all, the person who'd put her in this state was her lover's wife. A montage of memories flashed through my mind. Chloe, on the arm of a man named Marcus Thorne, laughing breathlessly at the very restaurant where I'd planned our anniversary dinner. Chloe, using the supplementary credit card I gave her to buy that same man a $40,000 watch, only to come home and complain, Ethan, you're so useless. You can't even give me the life I want. Chloe, coming home drunk late one night, her eyes filled with undisguised boredom and disdain as she looked at me on the couch. We're not in the same world anymore, she'd said, her voice like ice. You don't deserve me. Those words, those scenes had once been 1,000 tiny cuts, bleeding me dry. Now, they were the very foundation of the glacier in my soul. A passing nurse, probably unable to stand the drama, leaned in and whispered to the doctor, though loud enough for me to hear. Dr. Evans, I just heard from the cops. This woman was cornered at a hotel and beaten up by her lover's wife. The wife, an Ava Thorne, already turned herself in, said it was a domestic dispute. I put on a perfect expression of dawning realization. Oh, I said, turning to the doctor with a hint of well-placed sarcasm. Is that so? Well, in that case, doesn't that make me, the husband, a victim here as well? Perhaps I should go give the police a detailed statement. My words cornered the doctor completely. He looked at me, the unervingly calm victim, then at Chloe, whose blood pressure was spiking from the emotional distress, causing her wounds to seep fresh blood. He looked like he was developing a migraine. In the end, Chloe was rushed into surgery under an emergency protocol. I stood there, watching the double doors swing shut, sealing away her pained whimpers and the frantic movements of the medical staff. My heart was a block of ice. I was watching a drama I'd written and directed myself. The title? Just Deserts. I didn't leave the hospital. A nurse led me to a quiet office where 2 police officers were waiting. One of them, an older detective with sharp, assessing eyes, studied me, trying to find a crack in my placid facade. Mr. Ethan Hayes? We'd like to ask you a few questions regarding the assault on Ms. Chloe Reed. I nodded politely and pulled out a chair, my posture as steady as if my wife wasn't in surgery down the hall. Of course, officers. Ask whatever you need. What is your relationship to Ms. Reed? My answer was measured. Legally, she is my wife. I paused for effect, looking the detective straight in the eye. In reality, we've been separated for over a year. The marriage has broken down, and we're in the process of filing for divorce. To add weight to my words, I pulled out my phone and showed them a few carefully selected images. This is a draft of our separation agreement, signed a year ago. It's not legally binding, but it proves the state of our relationship. These are screenshots of my conversations with my divorce attorney from 6 months back. And these are our separate bank and credit card statement for the last 12 months, proving we have been financially independent. My thorough preparation clearly surprised them. The detective's gaze shifted from suspicion to something more like curiosity. Since you're separated, do you have any idea why Ms. Reed was at that hotel tonight? Or why she was assaulted? I managed a faint, bitter smile and shook my head. I have no idea. I didn't even know she was hurt until the hospital called. I don't even know where she's been living. I let out a soft, accidental sigh, continuing to play my role. To be honest, I suspected she was involved with a senior executive at her company last year. I was devastated, couldn't accept it. That's why I moved out. Since then, I've been quietly gathering evidence of her affair to prepare for the divorce. The younger officer immediately asked, "A senior executive? Who?" I feigned hesitation, as if struggling with the decision to name him. Finally, as if steeling myself, I said the name in a low voice. Marcus Thorne. He's the director of marketing at Apex Innovations. I then added, as if an afterthought, they're also one of our company's main competitors. Marcus Thorne, Chloe's lover, and the other leading man in tonight's tragicomedy. I was certain that the man who had pushed his own wife, Ava, to the breaking point was not having a good night. The officers quickly noted the information. The older detective's tone softened. "Mr. Hayes, this is very helpful. We'll look into it immediately. This may be more than just a simple assault case." I adopted the posture of a wronged husband trying to maintain his dignity. "All I want is a peaceful resolution," I said gravely. "I never imagined it would come to this. I hope the law will ensure justice is served." After the interview, I excused myself, claiming an urgent matter at work. Before I left, I made a point of stopping by the nurse's station to ask about Chloe's condition. I was told she was stable. No life-threatening injuries, just severe bruising and lacerations. She would need to be hospitalized for a few days. With that, the last flicker of uncertainty in my mind was extinguished. Good, as long as she didn't die. She needed to be alive to savor the feast I was preparing for her. Stepping out of the hospital, the cold night air hit my face, but I felt more clear-headed than ever. I got into my car, but didn't start the engine. Instead, I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I knew by heart. It was answered on the second ring. A calm, professional voice. "Mr. Hayes." It was my lawyer, Mr. Davison. My voice was instantly back to its normal, decisive tone, all traces of the weary victim gone. "Davison," I said, looking at the hospital's lights in my rearview mirror, my eyes hard as flint. "The narrative is starting to build. We can move to the next phase. The divorce proceedings, the asset division. We're going live. Full execution." The next day, I walked into the office at my usual time. I was dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, my hair immaculate, a polite but distant smile on my face. It was as if last night's hospital drama had been nothing but a bad dream. But I knew the storm was just beginning. The office air was thick with a strange tension. Colleagues gathered in hushed groups, their eyes darting toward me before quickly looking away. Their gazes, a mix of pity, contempt, and morbid curiosity, formed an invisible net around me. After the morning meeting, a colleague I was friendly with, Kevin, came over with his coffee, his face a mask of awkwardness. He hesitated, then finally held out his phone. "Eason, man, you doing okay? You should see this." On the screen was a push notification from a local news site. The headline was lurid and impossible to ignore. TechX sex affair explodes in violence. Mistress brutalized, husband's cold denial at ER. The article featured a photo of Chloe's battered face, pixelated but still recognizable to anyone who knew her. My name wasn't mentioned, but the phrase "husband's cold denial," paired with a blurry, paparazzi-style shot of my back as I left the hospital, made it perfectly clear who they were talking about. I stared at the photo, my hand tightening into a fist, knuckles white. I feigned shock, then let my expression morph into one of pained fury at the violation of my privacy. I handed the phone back to Kevin, my voice hoarse from faint emotion. I had no idea. I can't believe the media got this so fast. This is like being publicly executed. Inside, I was applauding Mr. Davison's efficiency. This was part of the plan. Public opinion could be a swifter, more brutal judge than any court of law. It could shatter a person's psyche, especially someone as vain and image-obsessed as Chloe. The article included a short, chaotic interview with Marcus Thorne's wife, Ava. Though emotional, she was articulate, detailing how Chloe had systematically inserted herself into her marriage, how she'd flaunted the expensive gifts Marcus had bought her. The details were so specific they were impossible to doubt. Every word from Ava was a scalpel, peeling back the layers of Chloe's carefully constructed facade. It didn't take long for my department head to call me into his office. He put a fatherly hand on my shoulder. "Ethan, I heard about what happened. I want you to know the company stands with you. However, this has become a very public issue, and it's not a good look for us. I need you to handle your personal affairs quickly and quietly, and minimize the blowback." Once again, I slipped perfectly into the role of the victim. I told him I was as much a casualty in this as anyone, betrayed, humiliated, and now under a microscope. I explained that the divorce was already in motion and that I hoped to put this ugly chapter behind me as soon as possible. I asked for the company's understanding. My boss sighed, expressed his sympathy, and promised to shield me from any unnecessary corporate flack. When I left his office, my phone was buzzing nonstop. Chloe's name flashed on the screen again and again. I looked at it, feeling nothing, and powered the phone off. Then I systematically blocked her number and the numbers of her entire family. Let her sit alone in that sterile hospital room. Let her stew in her anxiety, her fear, her desperation. Let her finally understand what it feels like to be abandoned by the entire world. That night, back in the empty house we once called home, I opened a bottle of wine I'd been saving. The deep red liquid swirled in the glass, the color of the blood on Chloe's face. I raised my glass to the city lights beyond the window and made a silent toast. To a small, but deeply satisfying victory. To the opening act of my revenge. Every sip was cool, sharp, and sweet. Chloe was in the hospital for 3 days. During that time, she tried everything to reach me, calls, texts, messages through every app we'd ever used. I ignored them all. When she was discharged, she walked straight into the eye of the media storm. Her face and story were trending on Twitter. The comment sections were a cesspool of vitriol and slut-shaming. It broke her. She showed up at my house, a wild look in her eyes, and started pounding on the door, screaming my name, trying to create a public scene. She even told the neighbors who came to their windows that I was emotionally abusive, that I was refusing to see her. I stood behind the door, watching her through the peephole, a disheveled, crazed woman, her cheap makeup failing to hide the fading bruises, making her look even more pathetic. I didn't open the door. I called building security, and then I called the police. I provided them with the video from my doorbell camera, showing her screaming and causing a disturbance. When the police arrived, they gave her a stern warning and escorted her off the property. After that, my neighbors' looks turned from suspicion to pure sympathy. A few days later, a certified letter from Davison's law firm arrived at her temporary address. It was the first official shot in our legal war. In the letter, we formally filed for divorce. The grounds: adultery and the fraudulent transfer and concealment of marital assets, making her the party at fault. Attached was a mountain of evidence. There were depositions from Marcus Thorne, who, in a desperate bid to save his own skin, had admitted to the affair. There were crystal-clear photos and videos, courtesy of a private investigator I'd hired months ago, of them entering and leaving boutique hotels. There were recovered text messages from her old phone, graphic, sordid exchanges that left nothing to the imagination. And, of course, there were links to the dozens of news articles about the beatdown she'd received from her lover's wife. Every piece of evidence was a nail hammered into the coffin of her reputation. The letter concluded with my demands. Due to her gross misconduct and the severe emotional distress she had caused me, I was requesting that in the division of assets, she be left with nothing. Furthermore, she was to pay me a 7-figure sum in punitive damages. That letter was the final straw. She panicked. The lawyer she hired took one look at our evidence packet, and told her bluntly that she had zero chance of winning. If this went to court, she would not only lose everything, but her name would be dragged through the mud so thoroughly it would never be clean again. She was terrified. She stopped trying to contact me and started sending messages through mutual friends begging for a truce. They relayed her tearful pleas, that she'd made a mistake, that Marcus had seduced her, that she still loved me, that she just wanted another chance. She even offered to walk away from most of the assets if I would just drop the suit and let it all go away quietly. After listening to a friend's report, I replied coldly, "Tell her that if she's truly sorry, she can start by giving back every single thing she ever got from me. This isn't about the money. It's about my dignity," which she stomped on. It's time for her to pick it up and hand it back. My unyielding stance shattered her last hope. That night, she came back. This time, there was no screaming, no pounding. When the doorbell rang, I looked at the security camera feed. She was kneeling on my front porch. The cold winter wind whipped her hair around her face. She was wearing a thin coat, shivering uncontrollably. She stared up at the camera, tears streaming down her face, repeating over and over, "Ethan, I was wrong. I was so wrong. Please, just open the door. Let's talk. Please, just give me a way out." Her voice was raw with a new kind of desperation and fear. I stood at my second-floor window, looking down at the kneeling figure on my porch. Once, I would have knelt for her. I would have done anything for her. But now, seeing her humbled in the dust, I felt nothing. No pity, no flicker of compassion. Only the cold, clean satisfaction of justice being served. "You chose this path, Chloe. Now it's time to pay the price." In the end, Chloe was forced to the negotiating table. The meeting was held at Mr. Davison's office, neutral ground that felt anything but. She sat across from me, wearing an expensive designer suit and flawless makeup, a desperate attempt to project an image of control. Her lawyer sat beside her, looking grim. "Ethan," she began, her voice trembling almost imperceptibly, "I know I messed up. I'm willing to compromise on the assets. But this house, we bought it together after we got married. You made the down payment, but we both paid the mortgage. It's marital property. I'm entitled to half." She was still fighting, still trying to claw back something for herself. Her tone was softer, but the deep-seated greed in her eyes was unchanged. I said nothing. I just lifted my tea and blew gently on the surface. Mr. Davison took his cue. He slid a folder across the polished table. "Ms. Reed," he said, his voice calm but firm, "before we discuss the division of the house, perhaps we should clarify the ownership of another significant asset." Every word was a stone dropped into the placid surface she was trying to maintain. "Our records show that in August of last year, you transferred $500,000 in a series of smaller, structured payments into a personal account belonging to your brother, Caleb Reed. Your brother then used these funds as a down payment on a condominium in the East End." Davison laid out the evidence one piece at a time: bank statements, a copy of the condo's purchase agreement, and a small digital voice recorder. "Ms. Reed, that $500,000 originated from one of Mr. Hayes's premarital investment accounts. You persuaded him to liquidate it, claiming it was for a joint family investment. It now appears to have been a premeditated, fraudulent transfer of marital assets." He pressed play on the recorder. Chloe's voice filled the silent room, tinny but clear. "Are you sure this is okay, Chloe? Did Ethan really say you could give me this money for the condo?" "It was her brother, Caleb. Don't worry about it," Chloe's voice replied, dripping with condescension. "He's so gullible, he'll believe anything I tell him. Just think of it as compensation. It's his fault he's not ambitious enough to give me the life I deserve." When the recording finished, the silence in the room was absolute. The color drained from Chloe's face. She stared at the evidence on the table, her body swaying as if she might faint. She thought she'd been so clever, so discreet. She never imagined I would dig this deep. Even worse, she never imagined I would bring her own brother into it. I finally set down my teacup and met her gaze. My eyes were arctic. "Chloe, I used to think you were just being a good daughter, helping out your family. I tolerated your little schemes because I thought that's what a husband does. I thought it was about love and understanding." My voice was quiet, but it sliced through her final defenses. "Now I see. In your world, there was never any love, only calculation. Ethan, you," she shot to her feet, her composure finally cracking. She pointed a shaking finger at me, her voice a hysterical shriek. You bastard! You set me up. You've been planning this all along. You just want to see me destroyed, don't you? Why won't you leave me with anything? I watched her meltdown with cold detachment. Leave you with anything? I asked softly. When you cheated on me, were you thinking about leaving me with my dignity? When you stole my money and played me for a fool, were you leaving me a way out? When you used my money to support your lover, then turned around and called me useless, were you leaving me a path forward then? Each question made her face grow paler. Mr. Davison intervened, his tone grave. Ms. Reed, I must advise you. Your actions constitute felony fraud. If we can't reach a settlement here, and this proceeds to discovery, the court will not only order the full amount returned, but will also rule for you to receive little to no share of the remaining assets. Your reputation will be ruined, and you will be financially destitute. Furthermore, we will reserve the right to press criminal charges against both you and your brother. The words criminal charges were the final blow. She collapsed back into her chair, her eyes vacant, all the fight gone out of her. Ultimately, on the advice of her lawyer, she surrendered. She signed the divorce agreement. It stipulated that she had 15 days to return the $500,000 in full. In exchange, I mercifully agreed to give her a minuscule portion of the remaining marital assets. It was barely enough to cover a year's rent, a pittance compared to what she had spent on designer bags alone. She was, for all intents and purposes, left with nothing. As she signed the last page, she looked up at me, her eyes filled with a venomous, all-consuming hatred. I simply met her gaze, my own heart a vast, empty space, weary from the battle, but finally at peace. The war over money and marriage was over. I had won, but my revenge was just getting started. The divorce was finalized with surprising speed. The moment I signed my name on the decree and held the official document in my hand, I let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding for years. A mountain of weight lifted from my shoulders, but a strange unease lingered. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still missing a crucial piece of the puzzle. A few days later, Mr. Davison handed me a thick manila envelope. Mr. Hayes, this came from the district attorney's office. In his plea negotiations, Marcus Thorne provided a more complete record of his communications with Ms. Reed. I thought you might find some of it illuminating. I went home to my empty house and opened the envelope. As I read through the pages of transcripts, my heart, which I thought had turned to stone, began to ache with a fresh, sharp pain. It hadn't been a year. They had gotten together 2 years ago, just after our first anniversary. The sickeningly sweet pet names, the casual, cruel mockery of me. It was all there in black and white, every word a branding iron against my soul. Ethan is such a bore. No imagination. Not like you. You always know how to surprise me. He's working late again. Good. Saves me from having to look at his pathetic face. Babe, my birthday's next month. Give me that new Dior bag. Don't worry, Ethan just got his bonus. I'll make up some story and get the money from him. In their world, I was nothing more than a walking ATM, a faceless utility. The rage and humiliation were so intense, I felt like I was choking. I forced myself to keep reading, and then I saw it. A series of messages that made the blood freeze in my veins. Honey, how's Project Horizon going at your company? I heard you guys hit a technical wall. Chloe's reply came minutes later. Yeah, Ethan's been losing his mind over it, working from home every night. I snuck a look at his laptop. Something about the core algorithm. I took some pictures of his notes. See if any of this helps. Attached were several photos. Photos of my whiteboard in my home office, covered in diagrams and lines of proprietary code. The architectural framework for our company's most important project. A roar filled my ears. My mind went blank. A chill shot up my spine and exploded in my brain. This wasn't just an affair. This wasn't just theft. This was corporate espionage. She had used our marriage, used my absolute trust in her, to steal my company's most valuable secrets and feed them to her lover. To our competitor, I ran to my office, fired up my work laptop, and immediately contacted our head of cybersecurity, requesting an emergency audit of my remote access logs for the past year. The results came back within an hour. On multiple nights when I had been working late from home, my computer had been accessed remotely. Files had been copied. The IP address of the remote device was traced back to the network of the very hotel where Chloe and Marcus had their trysts. The copied files were all from the Project Horizon folder. All of them top secret. Everything clicked into place. Why our company had been inexplicably outmaneuvered on 3 major bids in the last year. Why Marcus Thorne's company, Apex Innovations, always seemed to know our next move. I had been sleeping with the enemy. A viper I had welcomed into my home. Ethan Hayes, a senior project manager, a man who prided himself on logic and intellect, had been reduced to a mark, a source, a fool. My love, my trust, everything I had poured into our life together had been used as a weapon against me, against my career. A tidal wave of disgust, shame, and pure, unadulterated fury crashed over me. This time, it wasn't my heart that was breaking. It was my pride, my professional integrity, my entire sense of self. I wrestled down the urge to smash everything in sight. My revenge wasn't over. No, my revenge was just beginning. This time, I didn't just want her left with nothing. This time, I wanted to burn their world to the ground. I wanted to destroy them so completely that nothing would ever grow from the ashes. I worked through the night, meticulously assembling the chain of evidence. The logs of Chloe accessing my computer, time-stamped to the second. Her text messages with Marcus about Project Horizon, a clear-cut case of industrial espionage. A comparative analysis showing the startling similarities between our failed bids and Apex's subsequent successful launches. The next morning, I bypassed my direct supervisor and presented the entire dossier, along with my own detailed report, directly to our CEO and the head of the legal department. The atmosphere in the boardroom was heavy enough to suffocate. The company's top executives reviewed the evidence, their faces growing darker with every page. Our CEO slammed his fist on the table. "This is unconscionable. We have a corporate spy in our own house." He looked at me, his eyes a mixture of anger and sympathy. "Ethan, I am so sorry you've been put through this. Rest assured, the company will not let this stand." I rose to my feet and bowed my head slightly. "Sir, as the lead on Project Horizon, I take full responsibility for this security breach. I will accept any and all consequences." I paused, then met his gaze directly. "But I'm also asking the company to pursue this to the fullest extent of the law, to protect our interests and to clear my name. I want the people who stole our work to face justice." My stance was clear. I owned my mistake, but I demanded a fight. The executive team was unanimous. A special task force was created, reporting directly to the CEO. They assured me of their full support. To avoid market panic, the investigation would be kept quiet, but behind the scenes, a massive legal and tactical operation against Marcus Thorne and Apex Innovations was already in motion. During the internal investigation, I learned that Apex was pouring all its resources into a new flagship product called Project Genesis. From the leaked specs and marketing materials, it was clear that Project Genesis was a 90% clone of our stolen Project Horizon. They had even scheduled a massive launch event for the following month. This was my chance, my one and only shot. I went back to the CEO with a proposal. "Sir, let me lead a counter-development team. No one knows Project Horizon better than I do, which means no one knows the weaknesses and fatal flaws of Project Genesis better than I do." My eyes burned with a cold, focused fire. "Give me one more chance. Give me your best people and unlimited resources for 1 month. I promise you, when they launch their product, we will give them a surprise they will never forget." The CEO studied me for a long moment, then nodded decisively. "You've got it, Ethan. Whatever you need. Just bring me a victory." In that moment, I was reborn. The pain, the humiliation, it all transmuted into pure, unadulterated drive. I practically lived in the development lab, fueled by caffeine and nicotine. I assembled the company's best engineers, and we deconstructed the stolen plans for Project Horizon. I racked my brain, recalling every offhand comment Chloe had ever made about Marcus's work, his company's internal struggles, their technical shortcomings. Her boasts and complaints, once just annoying background noise, were now critical intelligence. We targeted every feature of Project Genesis and designed something better, faster, more revolutionary. We built backdoors into the very architecture they had stolen. We laid digital traps. On the screen, line by line, a new project took shape. It was far more powerful than Horizon or Genesis. It was a weapon. I looked at the schematics, my eyes gleaming in the dark. Chloe, Marcus, your party is over. In 1 month, on the biggest day of your lives, I'm going to personally shove you off your throne and watch you fall. 1 month later, the launch event for Apex Innovations Project Genesis was held at the city's largest convention center. The place was packed with investors, journalists, and industry players. It was a coronation, the pinnacle of Marcus Thorne's career. My team and I were there, seated in the back, under the guise of a potential partner company. I saw Chloe in the front row. She was wearing a vintage Chanel suit, her face a mask of heavy makeup. She couldn't completely hide the weary pallor beneath, but she held her head high, playing the part of the victor. Our eyes met across the crowded room. She gave me a look loaded with triumph, defiance, and a healthy dose of venom. She was showing me how much better off she was without me. I held her gaze for a moment, then looked away, as if she were a complete stranger. The presentation went off without a hitch. Marcus was in his element, a charismatic showman painting a glorious future for Project Genesis. The crowd loved it. Applause thundered, cameras flashed. At one point, he glanced in my direction, a smug, dismissive smirk on his face. He reached the grand finale of his speech. And so, he boomed, his arms outstretched. I declare that Project Genesis is officially launched. As the crowd erupted, my phone vibrated in my pocket. A text from Mr. Davison. 2 words, it's time. At that exact moment, our company's official website, along with dozens of major tech news outlets, went live with a surprise announcement. We were launching our own new product, Project Phoenix. Project Phoenix was the result of my team's 30 days of relentless work. It did everything Project Genesis did, but better, faster, and cheaper. It was built to exploit every single one of Genesis's architectural flaws. It wasn't just a competitor. It was an extinction-level event. Phones started ringing throughout the auditorium. The expressions on the faces of the journalists and investors in the front rows shifted from excitement to confusion, then to shock and outrage. A murmur rippled through the crowd, growing into a roar. On stage, Marcus could feel the tide turning. An aide rushed up and whispered frantically in his ear. The color drained from his face, replaced by a ghastly, mottled gray. Sweat beaded on his forehead. The hand holding the microphone began to shake. The flashing cameras, once a beacon of his success, were now a firing squad, capturing his and Chloe's stunned, horrified faces for the world to see. I stood silently amid the chaos, watching him stammer, trying and failing to regain control of the room. I could hear the angry whispers of investors demanding answers, the sharp questions being shouted by reporters. The house of cards they had built on my work was collapsing in real time. Immediately after our online reveal, our legal department issued a press release. It detailed Apex's unethical business practices and intellectual property theft in no uncertain terms. It announced our intention to seek massive damages in federal court. The news hit the stock market like a bomb. Apex's stock plummeted, losing over half its value in minutes. Partners pulled out, deals evaporated. The catastrophe was swift and total. On stage, Marcus swayed, his eyes rolling back in his head. He collapsed and was unceremoniously hauled away by his staff. The event descended into pandemonium. Through the churning crowd, I saw Chloe, her face a mask of pure fury. She fought her way toward me, her expensive suit now disheveled, her makeup streaked with tears. "Ethan," she shrieked, her voice raw with hate. "How could you be so cruel? How could you destroy everything?" I looked down at her, my expression as cold and unforgiving as a glacier. "You threw the first punch, Chloe," I said, my voice quiet but cutting through her hysteria. "And besides, you never had anything to destroy. You only ever destroyed yourself." In the aftermath, Marcus Thorne's company imploded, buried under an avalanche of lawsuits and a catastrophic loss of investor confidence. It was liquidated within weeks. Marcus himself was indicted by a grand jury for conspiracy to commit industrial espionage. Facing a mountain of irrefutable evidence, he did what all cowards do. He turned on his accomplice. He told the prosecutors that Chloe was the mastermind, that she had stolen my company's data as a way to seduce him, and that he was just an innocent man led astray. In his desperation, he threw the woman he once called his prize into the abyss without a second thought. Chloe was soon arrested as a co-conspirator. The charges were serious. The life of luxury she had killed for vanished, replaced by the cold reality of a holding cell and the prospect of a long prison sentence. Her pride, her vanity, her ambition, all of it crumbled to dust. The media had a field day, plastering their faces and their sordid story across every news outlet. They became a cautionary tale, a citywide punchline. And me? My public image underwent a complete transformation. My company launched a PR campaign that painted me not as a cold-hearted husband, but as a resilient professional who, after a devastating personal betrayal, had engineered a brilliant comeback. My reputation was restored, and my career skyrocketed. I did a few interviews with major business journals, speaking calmly about the importance of ethics and integrity, both personal and professional. My story became a minor legend in the tech world. During this time, Chloe's brother, Caleb, showed up at my office, threatening to make me pay. But I was prepared. Corporate security and police officers I'd given a heads up to were waiting. He was arrested for harassment and spent 15 days in county jail. Chloe's parents also came to see me, weeping, begging me to have mercy on their daughter. I looked at their faces, so much like hers, etched with the same calculating greed, and felt nothing. "You reap what you sow," I told them quietly. "When you encouraged her to bleed me dry, you should have known a day of reckoning would come." This was her choice. I had security show them out. Shortly after, my lawyers successfully recovered the full $500,000 she had funneled to her brother, with interest and penalties. It wasn't about the money. It was about erasing every last trace of her family's parasitic influence from my life. It was about making them understand the true meaning of rock bottom. A few months later, the legal process reached its conclusion. Chloe was found guilty of conspiracy and theft of trade secrets. She was sentenced to several years in a federal prison. When Mr. Davison called to give me the news, I was sitting alone in the house that had once held all my love and all my hate. The sun was streaming through the windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. The storm had passed. My world was quiet again. After the dust settled, my life found a new, better rhythm. My role in the success of Project Phoenix led to a major promotion. I became one of the youngest VPs in the company's history, with a compensation package and stock options beyond my wildest dreams. But I no longer lived for my job. I started taking time for myself. I joined a gym, took cooking classes, and spent my weekends hiking in the mountains or going to symphony concerts. I filled the empty spaces in my soul not with work, but with life. At an industry conference, I ran into Ava Thorne, Marcus's ex-wife, the woman who had, in a way, started it all. Her divorce was final. She'd cut her hair into a chic, short style and looked sharper and more confident than I'd ever seen her. She had started her own interior design firm and was making a name for herself. She approached me and raised her glass. "Mr. Hayes, Ethan, it's been a while." She offered a small, wry smile. I wanted to apologize for the scene I made at the hospital. It was a messy way to handle things. I shook my head. "You have nothing to apologize for. In a way, you did me a favor. You gave me the final push I needed." She laughed, a sound of genuine, hard-won relief. "Well, you returned the favor. You helped me see Marcus for the snake he truly was. You helped me get out. There was no romance between us, nothing of the sort. Just a quiet, profound understanding between two people who had survived the same kind of fire. We became friends, meeting for coffee now, and then sharing stories of rebuilding our lives from the rubble. Slowly, I healed. The anger and bitterness faded, replaced by a strength and peace I'd never known. I finally understood that moving on didn't mean forgetting. It meant being able to look back without feeling the sting. I started dating again, cautiously at first. I had learned to love myself first, to give my heart without losing my head. I sold the house with all its ghosts and bought a penthouse apartment on the other side of the city with a view of the river. I designed it myself, clean lines, open spaces, and lots of natural light. The money Chloe was forced to pay in damages, I donated anonymously in my company's name to a charity that provides scholarships for underprivileged girls. It felt like the right way to close the book, to turn something ugly into something good. My new life was quiet, stable, and genuinely happy. Years later, I was driving through the city and happened to pass the hospital. I glanced at the imposing white building and felt a sense of calm detachment. The memories were there, but they no longer had power over me. I heard through the grapevine that Chloe was denied parole due to poor behavior in prison. Marcus Thorne had disappeared completely after his bankruptcy, their names fading into the city's noisy, forgetful history. Ava and I are still good friends. We both found happiness, thriving in our own right. At a charity gala, I met a woman, a literature professor with kind eyes and a warm, intelligent smile. She understood the complexities of my work, and she appreciated the quiet strength in me that had been forged in fire. We fell in love easily, naturally. Our relationship wasn't a whirlwind romance, but a slow-growing garden of mutual respect, understanding, and gentle affection. I learned how to trust again, but I never lost the wisdom that comes from betrayal. I never again made another person the sole architect of my happiness. My life is full now. A career I'm proud of, a partner I adore, a few true friends, and an unshakable sense of inner peace. Looking back, the visceral thrill of revenge has long since faded. I am, strangely, grateful for the pain. It taught me about the depths of human nature, and it forced me to discover the strength within myself. The man who was broken by his wife's betrayal was gone, reborn from the ashes. I finally understood the ultimate victory isn't about grinding your enemies into the dust. It's about building a life so beautiful and full that you forget they ever existed. The afternoon sun slanted through the windshield, warm on my face. I smiled, put the car in drive, and merged into the flow of traffic, heading toward the future. The road ahead was long, and for the first time in forever, it was completely my own.